disciples were terrified, and they were full of joy. I am full of joy and a little bit terrified. I know some of you, once I get to know all of you, I will be less terrified. But it's opportune that these lessons today, especially this gospel, talk about fear, which gives me a great introduction. I don't know about you, but fear has been a response of mine throughout my life. Something new happens, I am instantly afraid. I've had to learn from long experience that Christ is always with me, to teach me how to deal with my fear, to be my friend and my guide, and to show me that even when I didn't know he was there, he was holding me up. So though you don't see him, he is holding me up. Now, this story that we get today from Luke, it's very hard to take a little capsule of Luke, as it is with all of the Gospels, and think we've got the whole story. So I need to give you a little background. This is all one story that took place on Easter Day. We are still on Easter Day. Even though we're 2 weeks from our Easter, the disciples are still on Easter Day. And what has happened this Easter Day is that Mary Magdalene and her women friends went to the empty tomb, right? And they saw two angels in dazzling light. And they were terrified, full of fear. And what they did in their fear was they fell on the ground and they put their faces on the ground. Now this position is a position of awe, wonder, and acknowledgement that they are in the presence of the holy. So although they were afraid, they knew they were in the presence of the holy, and down they went. They believed what the angel said. The angel said, "He is not here. He is risen. Go and tell your friends." They are the first disciples to the disciples. So they went running back to tell the disciples, "We saw some angels. He's not there. The angel said he is risen." And the disciples did not believe them. They're women. What do they know? So that's what happened this morning. We have our first episode of fear and trembling. They went down on their knees in awe, and they did what they were told. They went and told the good news. That teaches us a lesson, so remember that. The second part of this story happens on the road to Emmaus, which we don't hear this morning, but it's the second part. On the road to Emmaus, there were just two disciples. They heard Jesus speak, but they didn't know it was Jesus. We, the reader or the listener to this gospel, we know it's Jesus. The scripture says Jesus walked with them to Emmaus. And while he was walking with them, he opened up the scriptures and revealed to them how it was God's plan, that he walk with his disciples in life, that he suffer and die, and that he be brought back again from the dead. This was God's plan. Human frailty was part of that plan. Betrayal was part of that plan. But you see Jesus never, ever quivering, never saying, "Oh, I don't think I want to do this." He prays to God every time he is not sure, and he pushes the plan to happen. He doesn't just cooperate, he pushes it towards happening. He is very much involved in his death and his resurrection. Still, they have no idea this is Jesus with them. They go to have a meal, and at the meal, at the Eucharistic meal, where he breaks the bread and shares food with them, in an instant they see it's Jesus, and he's gone. Whew. They don't even have time to be afraid. He's gone. But they believe. And they run back to Jerusalem to tell the rest of the disciples. And that's where we are today. This is the very first time that all of Jesus' followers are together. They're all there. Mary Magdalene and all the women are there. Now the two men that were in Emmaus are there. When they get there, they hear that Simon Peter has also seen Jesus, and he believed. And as they're standing there together, there's Jesus. And they all see him together. They're not relying on anybody's telling them so. And they are full of what?
Wonder.
They're terrified. They are terrified. And even when Jesus says, it is me, look, it's me, look at my hands, look at my feet, it really is me, in their joy, they are still terrified. And that's me this morning. In their joy, they are still terrified. And Jesus then gives them the next little bit of grace. He says, have you anything to eat? I'm hungry. Now, would you be hungry after all he's been through? He's hungry. And in this simple statement, he shows that beauty of the incarnation, of his becoming a human being, is still a part of the risen Christ. He carries his humanity into the grave and back again. He's hungry. This isn't an apparition. It is not a ghost. It is Jesus who says, feed me. So what do? They take some broiled fish off the little broiler, and they feed him, and he eats. And it doesn't say that terror leaves them, but it does say the next thing. He revealed Scripture to them again. So we see a pattern here, that when we experience Jesus, and here we are together, and we are to experience Jesus in the breaking of bread, just as those first disciples did. And the early Christian church, who was so sad that they hadn't got to see Jesus in person. They have these stories, and they are no different, and we're no different than we are today. That we experience the risen Christ in our Scripture, in the breaking of bread, and in community. And this is where we gather to share our communal stories and our life stories. Because without our life stories, we don't know who each other are. Like they watched Jesus eat bread, or eat the fish, we need to watch each other and see when one of us is ailing and needs our help, when one of us is full of joy and celebrating and needs us to celebrate with them. We are community for a reason. You now have a new member of your community who is hungry to hear your stories and anxious to pray with you, whether you are celebrating, grieving, fearful, or lonely. So your first responsibility with this new priest is to talk to me. Please, I am very approachable. And the first responsibility of those disciples was to what? They had to go make friends. You can't just go around and hand out Jesus literature and expect people to get it. You have to befriend people and tell them that you are full of joy that Christ has died and Christ is risen, and you have the good news in your life. And you can tell stories from your life that prove that you know who Christ is. Now, I have a feeling that our Episcopal Church hasn't been too good at bringing this fear and trembling into Easter. How many of you were afraid on Easter morning? Hands. One. We've turned Easter into lilies and pretty Hallmark cards, lots of singing, lots of joy, our favorite stuff. We forget to be terrified. Terrified. And let me just take a little walk with you around this church to show you not terror so much as awe, and awe comes from the same root. This immense feeling of trembling and awe that comes over you when you know you are in the presence of the holy. So I'm going to bring you with me to the first time I walked into your church, because it surprised me. I walked in, and part of my interview, I came in through the transept here, and the first place I was taken was to the apse. And I looked up, and now I've been to the Holy Land, and I've been to Turkey, and I've seen the caves of Cappadocia, where they have mosaics that have not been restored. So I was not aghast at the dirt. I didn't see any dirt on this. I looked up and I saw Jesus on the throne in the most magnificent mosaic I have ever laid my eyes on, and I felt awe. My knees got weak. I said, oh my goodness, do you see what you have here? And yes, that mosaic was done by Tiffany. Did you know that? Most of you know that. I was just blown away. And then I walked into the church, and I could feel feel the years and years of prayer that have taken place in this church. I didn't even see the windows yet. And I felt the holiness. And I was aware enough to let it knock me over and just live in that awe and trembling for a minute. And that's what we as human beings are not very good at. We don't like awe and trembling. It's an uncomfortable feeling. It's wonderful, but it's not something we feel every day. We need to remember that Christ rising from the dead is something to be absolutely amazed at. And when we believe it, we are able to look back and see the resurrections that we have had in our own lives. That when we have been brave enough to go into the dark places, knowing that we have God on our side, we gain the joy of having traveled the road, never alone, but with Jesus at our side. And we learn things through that darkness, through the death and resurrection. We learn who we are. We are God's children now. Who we will be, we don't yet know. But we can guarantee ourselves that we will not be alone, and that we travel together to give each other the strength and willingness to live this life of Christ, which is full of fear and trembling. I am ready. Are you?